It's been one of the most successful businesses in the tourism industry over the last 70 years, with a 1.7 billion euro turnover and more than 40 million customers since it first began selling holidays. Club Med. This brand created its own social codes. Guests are known as GMs and employees as GOs.
The social codes are the same, whichever Club Med resort you go to. Even if you're in another country, it's like being at home. Club Med is a brand everybody knows, that everyone has an opinion on.
Who were the two visionaries behind this success story? How did they build their brand and revolutionize holidays? This is the story of a holiday club that started with nothing.
The resorts and tents were very basic.
And became a high-end multinational tourism company. In a few years, Club Med managed to get its logo known around the world. Its famous trident. Luxury hotels, cruise ships, organized tours of every kind. With its 65 resorts located in 25 countries across the world, every year more than 1.5 million tourists head to Club Med.
A Brazilian can go to China, someone from China can go to the Alps, and a French person can go to Mauritius.
The incredible rise of a brand which almost crumbled after an unprecedented dramatic incident.
Un avion frété par le club Méditerranée s'est écrasé ce matin au Sénégal.
It was a catastrophe which took the lives of 30 people.
The plane that was heading for Capscuring and crashed was a terrible incident that Gilbert never recovered from.
But despite the challenges, thanks to continuous innovation, Club Med was always able to come back and continue to influence the holidays of the future. Parios, bar beads, which removed the need for money inside its resorts, its all-inclusive package, which was revolutionary at the time, and the hitherto unknown sports, which were included in that. To retrace the history of Club Med, we must go back to its glory days, discuss the whole history of modern tourism, and above all, tell the story of the extraordinary societal revolution over the last 70 years. Club Med liberated women despite the assumed moral standards of the day.
Club Med was a sort of testing ground for them to try out life as liberated women, if I can put it that way.
Among social disruption and historical upheavals, this is the story of the crazy adventure of this symbol of world tourism, which has continued to reinvent itself and has created a veritable holiday culture of its own. Club Med. The story of Club Med is also the story of two geniuses whose company weathered every storm possible over 70 years. To build their empire, they needed to be the first to understand what it was people wanted. More than ever after the Second World War, people were looking for a way to escape and have fun, and to enjoy time with their families. And so they began to go on holiday for the first time. In France, the official introduction of 2 weeks paid holiday dates back to 1936. But it was only 9 years later, after the war, that people were finally ready to take advantage of it.
Holidays were official from 1936, but the social phenomenon didn't get started until 1945.
People were craving social connections, contact. They were looking for a feeling of togetherness. The war had divided them, and they dreamed of being reunited.
Vacances, le voici arrivé, le moment tant attendu. On va partir, on est parti. Départ soigneusement, méticuleusement organisé.
People would buy a car to go on holiday. At the time, the little Renault 4 was the popular choice. But you can't separate that from the idea of heading towards the Mediterranean, the sun, the heat, where people wore less and were more free.
The bikini had arrived. And as its surface area decreased, its popularity increased.
People learned to swim. People didn't know how. All these activities had to be discovered and learned. There was a magical aspect to it, a feeling of liberation.
And a couple of young, gifted people would surf this wave of liberation, one of whom was a 37-year-old Belgian called Gerard Blitz, who was a high-level sports player with more than a few ideas.
He was a great man. His father was a diamond merchant, and he was an international water polo player. He was a great sportsman, and he was passionate about yoga, totally zen. Gerard was a very charismatic person who would always hold your hands in his, who was an incredible storyteller with utopian ideals.
He was from another planet. He had these extraordinary ideas. To him, the world was beautiful.
During the war, Gérard Blitz had joined the resistance. He was contacted by Belgian state security and asked to head up a resistance network which conveyed secret documents to London. In spring 1945, when the war finally ended, the Belgian state asked him to take charge of prisoner repatriation.
After the war, Gérard was commissioned by the Belgian government to look after people who were leaving the concentration camps.
His job? To help those who'd experienced real horror rediscover their taste for life. Gérard Blitz welcomed them to hotels in the Alps over 2 years before they returned to Belgium.
And Blitz was in charge of that. It was a sort of therapy for prisoners of war who were traumatized because of lack of human contact and isolation.
And I think it was around that time that he decided he wanted to bring people happiness.
But first, Gérard Blitz moved to Paris and opened a clothes shop. In fact, he didn't dream up the Club Med concept straight after his Belgian mission. That all happened a little later at another establishment. In the summer of 1949, he spent some time at the Calvi Olympic Club in Corsica. This is what it looked like. A few hundred square meters of tents with accommodation, meals and sporting activities all included in the price.
That's where the penny dropped. Because sitting in the shade of a Calvi pine forest with beautiful sunshine, emerald waters and white sand, he discovered a campsite resort which was built around a dance floor.
Here, young people were making the most of a carefree holiday. He fell in love with this hitherto unknown concept, and Gérard Blitz decided to start his own version, a not-for-profit company with the same unusual ideals of sharing and equality. He wanted a name that would remind people of warm sand under their feet. On April the 27th, 1950, he registered the name Club Méditerranée at the Paris Prefecture, and a friend designed him a logo, which he scribbled on a napkin at a Parisian bar. It was pure gold, the sea god Neptune's trident with a capital M woven through it. Assisted by his wife, he organized his very first holiday. Everything needed to be perfect. That same year, the French said goodbye to ration books, and the minimum wage was introduced. Gérard Blitz headed off to explore the island of Mallorca, part of Franco's Spain. There he discovered his dream location, Alcudia, wild country within a pine forest by the sea. His goal was to take over this little fishing hamlet, which he set up with running water and electricity. He promised his customers a new and amazing type of holiday package based on the campsite resort idea he'd seen at the Olympic Club in Calvi. He went one step further and included a large and devoted team of personnel from his post-war experience. It was an all-inclusive package, which was revolutionary at the time. There was just one problem. It wasn't cheap. 16,800 old francs for a 2-week stay, the equivalent of 488 euros in today's money and proportionate to the minimum wage in 1950. A small fortune at the time, especially for a holiday club that was totally unknown. It was time to get to work. Gérard Blitz needed to find guests for his holiday camp quickly. It took resourcefulness. In Belgium, his father, Maurice Blitz, put a sandwich board on top of his car. In Paris, Gérard Blitz used all his ingenuity to get people talking about his club. He even used a very cunning marketing technique.
Nous avions mis ces affiches dans le métro. Et on avait fait imprimer des bandes collantes où il y avait marqué complet avant de poser les affiches. Et nous avions convenu avec Métrobus, qui était la régie de la publicité dans le métro, quoi qu'il arrive, de coller ces bandes 8 jours après. Alors il y a eu un gros succès au début, mais quand on a mis les bandes complètes, ça a été une ruée.
The result was that Gérard Blitz had inquisitive, curious customers from both France and Belgium signed up for a 2-week stay. Right from the start, the trip didn't exactly resemble a holiday. The journey from Paris took 36 hours. Holidaymakers took the train, a boat, then a bus. It was an expedition in itself. On site, here's what they discovered. A tent resort that looked like a military camp and which provided only cursory comfort. The tents were made from American Army surplus materials which leaked as soon as it rained. The showers were communal and the toilet facilities were basic.
C'était du sous-camping, hein? Des WC qui étaient faits de 4 planches et un trou, et quand le trou était plein, on déplaçait les 4 planches.
The group had to make do with 12 pairs of flippers between them. All the activities were run by 20 or so sporty friends of Gérard Blitz. Despite the sparse comforts, the location worked its magic. The post-war younger generations were thirsty for experiences.
Today we'd call them bohemians, but at that time that didn't mean anything. They were people who'd been to university, teachers, people who liked sports. So they weren't people who were particularly rich, but they did have a disposable income. That's how I'd describe them. So they couldn't afford to go to grand hotels, and it wasn't in their culture to do so. I don't even think they'd have wanted to. Grand hotels weren't for them, you could say, and they were also innovators.
Unusually for the time, at Club Méditerranée, people had to call each other by their first names. Gérard Blitz had one aim: for people to meet, talk and share. There were no tête-à-tête meals at the club. Instead, tables of 8 were the standard.
The idea behind the club was that people would be thrown together, and that was the most important thing, for people to create emotional, friendly connections, and even romantic ones.
In just a few minutes, the people who arrived, who'd spent 36 hours on a train, with skin as pale as can be, it was crazy. And within just a few minutes, it was, get over here, have some punch, have some sangria. People were singing, people were dancing. By the end of the first night, everyone knew each other like they'd all been to the same wedding. And they were all the family members come together.
For the first time, the words customer and staff were removed from the vocab list. Staff instead were known as GOs and holidaymakers were known as GMs.
A key word within the club was gentillesse or kindness, GOs and GMs, gentil membre and gentil organisateur. But it wasn't supposed to be trite or pejorative. They really meant kind in its truest sense. Kind in the sense that you looked out for each other.
It was this idea of a constant party euphoria within the group, a community which saw itself as totally egalitarian. You weren't there to talk about what you did for a living, but what you wanted to do in the here and now.
Gérard Blitz's gamble paid off. The GMs didn't want to leave. At the end of the summer, it was Franco's army which blew the whistle on playtime, forcing them to leave the island. That summer, Gérard Blitz successfully organized 4 two-week stays. In total, 2,300 holidaymakers visited Alcudia.
I think that the first summer was pretty miraculous. There were issues. There was a storm at one point in which the resort was all but destroyed. Gérard brought everyone together and said, there are 2 options. You can all go home and we'll reimburse you, if we can, or you can help me rebuild the resort. All the GMs helped rebuild the resort, and people say that's where the club spirit originally came from, and that's how the adventure began.
The following year, twice as many holidaymakers visited a little black sandy cove in the Gulf of Barati in Italy. Gérard Blitz was already dreaming of swapping tents for more comfortable accommodation for his guests. And as usual, he did it his own way. In 1952 in Corfu, Greece, Gérard Blitz could have immersed himself in local folklore. But instead, the GOs and GMs were installed in a Tahiti-inspired resort. Club Méditerranée's creator was hitting hard with this new idea, building his brand's identity.
The big change came when he secretly built and then opened the resort in Corfu, where he introduced pareos, straw huts, and put in place a Polynesian decor for the very first time.
There were flowers and necklaces and pareos everywhere, just like in Tahiti. Tahitians would often come to the resorts with their little banjos, and when they sang, people would go wild for it.
The pareo, this magical piece of fabric, became a must-have at the club. Originally the official uniform of the GOs, GMs began to flock to the shops to buy them. Pareos then became the must-have export on beaches all over the world and was seen as the essential holiday accessory.
Going to Club Med was to enter an alternative universe which took you to a tropical paradise. Real or imaginary, it didn't matter. That was the whole point. Going to Club Med wasn't about discovering the world. It was about leaving the world behind.
Corfu was a total success. Every future club would adopt the idea of hut resorts with a Tahitian vibe. As France began to recover economically, more and more holidaymakers began to choose Club Méditerranée.
J'ai beaucoup de collègues qui disent par exemple, je ne comprends pas que tu vas au Club Méditerranée. Moi, je préfère organiser mes vacances. Moi, je leur dis, je m'organise toute l'année. Moi, le club me les organise pour moi. Je préfère le club.
Some were even prepared to queue all night outside Club Med's offices before registration opened.
There were scenes of hysteria because people wanted to get away. They wanted to be sure that they'd get their 3 weeks in August at the result of their choice, which is what pushed the club to grow more quickly, because 2,000 to 3,000 people didn't get a place. Some people would get up at 3 in the morning and queue, only to be told that there were no more space for them that summer and that they'd have to come back next year.
Gérard Blitz decided to open more resorts. 3 years after its creation, and the club was becoming more and more popular, but profitability was not a top priority for Gérard Blitz, who wasn't good at money management. The club was living off credit. The business was in debt.
On a découvert des choses énormes. Les gens venaient au club, payaient la compte de 50 francs et ne payaient pas le solde et revenaient avec leur famille au club d'une année sur l'autre parce qu'on les oubliait.
Club Med's growth certainly brought the questions of management to the fore very quickly. Club Med quickly had money and debt problems because investments were not well managed. So they needed someone to do that.
The man for the job was someone Gérard Blitz had known a long time. He'd already saved Gérard's skin when he had first started the club. His name was Gilbert Trigano. He was 30 years old and sold tents. The two men had met when 30-year-old Gérard Blitz was preparing his first holiday camp at Alcudia.
Gerard was looking for camping equipment. He didn't have any money, so he went to the Ministry for Industry at the time, who gave him a telephone book, and he saw the name Trigano, father and son. He thought, I'd rather work with a family than an anonymous company. And almost 15 minutes later, Gerard was face-to-face with Gilbert. He explained his plan. Gilbert thought it was wonderful. Gerard said, listen, I don't have a huge budget. Gilbert said, don't worry, we'll find a solution. And that's how the club started.
Gilbert Trigano was immediately charmed by Blitz and his concept. He became his supplier. 3 years later, he was still offering him credit. In 1954, Gilbert Trigano became treasurer of what was still a not-for-profit company.
The idea was too good to be true, like all utopias. It was Blitz's idea, but he needed some founding principles, a bedrock, a structure, and that's what Trigano gave him. He provided Club Med with the stability it was lacking up until that point.
He only slept 4 hours a night, so he had the time. He worked tirelessly. Gilbert Trigano was a great businessman, as well as a great humanist. He was wonderful.
They officially split control 50-50, but Gilbert Trigano quickly took over the management reins and became the brains behind the Trident branding.
Monsieur, vous êtes en somme un marchand de vacances. Marchand de vacances, pas de question. Pour quelle raison pensez-vous que les gens s'adressent à un club tel que le vôtre?
Parce que peut-être nous essayons de résoudre pour eux les 1000 problèmes qui se posent à eux devant leurs vacances. Nous essayons de faire de leurs vacances une plénitude, une fonction de joie.
He had this unbelievable charisma, and he could transport people with him, get them to follow him. If Gilbert said, listen, we have money problems, we can't pay you for a year, we'd all have said, fine.
Between 1948 and 1956, French people's income had tripled, and paid holiday was extended from 2 to 3 weeks. Gilbert Trigano began by increasing the cost of a holiday by 30% and putting the accounts in order. The following year, the not-for-profit company became a business with one goal: profitability. Club Méditerranée now had a new location, somewhere guests would never have imagined going to.
Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong.
To get Club Méditerranée working throughout the winter too, Gilbert Trigano decided to establish a mountain resort in Les Uns, Switzerland. They'd learned to water ski, and now GMs were learning alpine skiing too. It was a first-time experience for the majority, and it was a great success. Club Méditerranée opened 4 more winter sports resorts to add to its 11 summer resorts. Gilbert Trigano put a completely new strategy in place. He invested everything in a mass of new sports activities.
Chacun fait ce qu'il veut, quand il veut, comme il veut.
1 honnêtement, 2 et coup de genou. Alors, oui. Alors ne vous crispez pas, soyez très souple. Vas-y. 1, 2 et voilà, c'est bon. Très bien, on va recommencer encore une fois.
Combat sports, mini-golf, yoga, tennis, horse riding, even clay pigeon shooting. For holidaymakers, it was like the Olympic Games every day.
It was the biggest sports institution in the world. People would learn a new sport at the club because they had the chance to. You wouldn't necessarily think of doing archery, but if the archery range is 200 meters away, you think, yeah, I'll give it a go.
But what everyone wanted to try out was aquatic sports. The famous all-inclusive package with a variety of amazing activities was a brand new concept.
Tends tes bras, garde tes skis parallèles. Laisse-toi tirer en non.
It was at Club Med that the French discovered water skiing. Before Club Med, nobody water skied. Today, no one water skis at Club Med because it's totally out of fashion.
Over the decades, the club has never stopped increasing its offer and innovating.
There are sports at Club Med today which nobody does anywhere else. For example, electric paddleboarding, electric mountain biking, circus acts. Your children can practice circus acts for a whole week with real professionals. You can do sports at Club Med that you can't do anywhere else. So it's a unique service they're offering.
Today, bar consumption is included in the price. But at the start of the club's history, it was a separate charge. The problem was that it was difficult to carry a purse in your patio. Gilbert Trigano had an idea that would allow guests to order drinks, whatever they were wearing. He even made it fun. A new accessory was introduced at the club. You could wear it around your head, your neck, your wrist, or in your swimwear. They were called bar beads, and they were revolutionary.
Tu m'as donné ces boules. Oui. Qu'est-ce que j'en fais?
C'est pour régler tes consommations au bar.
Et qu'est-ce que ça vaut?
Tu as les boules dorées.
Oui.
Après, tu as les boules noires, les boules marron, beige, et après, tu as les boules blanches.
Et alors, ce qu'il y a de mieux, c'est qu'on ne sait pas ce que l'on paye.
Exactement.
À la fin du séjour,
tu n'as plus un rond.
Bar beads were the definitive denial of cash. Okay, it depended on what you ordered. An orange squash and a daiquiri didn't cost the same number of beads. That was a little technical flaw in the utopian idea. But it's the idea that counts, and the principle that you never saw any actual money change hands.
Malheureusement, ça s'use très vite, c'est très pratique, on n'a pas l'impression de dépenser de l'argent, mais enfin, il faut quand même acheter son petit poilier.
So the club was somewhere where, whether you had a small or larger budget, no one could tell. When you're in swimwear with bar beads around your neck, no one can tell how much you're worth. So that created a feeling of equality, and what made the difference was your personality.
By abolishing the circulation of money in the resorts, bar beads became a part of the ideal and egalitarian society that Gérard Blitz and Gilbert Trigano dreamed of establishing, even if in reality it wasn't accessible to everyone. In the 1950s, a 2-week stay cost the equivalent of the minimum wage per person, which is roughly 1,500 euros in today's money.
Alors évidemment, c'est pas très bon marché, mais enfin, pour des gens qui ont des salaires bas, bien sûr. Enfin, ici, je pense pas que ce soit des gens qui aient des salaires bas. Alors si vous voulez, pour ce qu'on leur donne, c'est pas cher, mais c'est quand même beaucoup d'argent pour les...
Club Med was never meant to be accessible to all. Club Med has never been for laborers or office workers. Club Med has always been a package deal, an all-inclusive, expensive holiday, because it includes transport, accommodation, meals, and all the activities.
The end of the 1950s signaled the beginning of Club Méditerranée chartered trains. The additional third week of paid holiday tripled the number of holidaymakers in 10 years. Nearly 40% of French people took a vacation. Gilbert Trégano and Gérard Blitz began to assess their success. Resorts were opening all over Europe and the world. The club was becoming international. Holidaymakers trusted Club Méditerranée and paid for their trip in advance, which allowed its creators to invest in new installations. But very soon, despite the number of guests, the cash register was empty.
Gilbert and Gerard would use the money from GMs who paid for their holiday in advance to finance long-term investments. That created a small problem at the beginning of the 60s when the club had a real hole in its finances and couldn't pay its staff members. So it was desperately looking for funding. The banks refused one after the other, saying the business had no future and their plan wouldn't work.
Club Méditerranée was on the edge of bankruptcy, but one prestigious client came to its aid. Baron Edmond de Rothschild. He may have been one of the richest men in Europe, but what he really enjoyed was slumming it at the club. He invested 10 million francs in the club to save the business. It was a fortune.
Edmond de Rothschild had spent some time in some of the club's resorts almost by chance. For example, Caprera in Sardinia, where he'd arrived on his boat. He'd have more fun at the club than in the grand hotels of Sardinia. He discovered a way of life at the club that he could never have imagined. People called him by his name, partied with him when everywhere else people would practically bow down to him. So he thought it was a very unusual place, and because he was quite unusual himself, there was immediate chemistry.
In 1963, Edmond de Rothschild became the club's main shareholder, and there was a reshuffling at director level. Gilbert Trégano became CEO, and his son Serge joined in the adventure. He started his career as a GO. Gérard Blitz, on the other hand, decided to devote himself to his passion, Zen Buddhism. Alone at the helm, Gilbert Trégano started a new revolution. No more improvising. Comfort was made a priority. The club's Agadir resort in Morocco was the start of something new. It was the first resort with permanent accommodation. But it was also a money-making machine, since it was open all year round. Gilbert Trégano built resorts that were more and more comfortable. They were built for older guests with greater means, who were more international and had higher expectations.
They went from tents to real living spaces, then from simple buffet meals to more sumptuous offerings. There was a sort of abundance that was put on display.
Since the new clubs were open all year round, Gilbert Trégano absolutely had to increase the number of guests. He could no longer count on young single people and young couples. The CEO had a new idea aimed at families. Many clubs made their appearance using a questionable slogan: spend your greatest child-free holiday with them.
Je pars le matin pour la chasse sous-marine. J'arrive pour le repas midi. L'après-midi, je fais la sieste jusqu'à 2h30. Ensuite, je joue au ping-pong, puis je fais un tour de ski nautique.
Et ça, tes parents, tu leur dis chaque fois je vais là et là et là, ou
non,
que tes parents contrôlent?
Non, non. Je suis entièrement libre.
Les parents vous demandent jamais des comptes le soir, qu'est-ce que tu as fait aujourd'hui, qu'est-ce que...
Non, ils nous demandent si on s'est bien amusé. C'est tout.
Parents and children could enjoy their holidays independently.
One of the Club Med's strengths was that they looked after the kids. They would learn things in kids' clubs, and the parents were free.
For women, it was amazing. You didn't think about housework, cooking, grocery shopping. They just enjoyed themselves. Everyone enjoyed themselves.
Je regarde, je me promène, je me dors au soleil. Et ça vous suffit? Rien de particulier. Je regarde les gens. C'est amusant.
Mothers could take the time to relax at the club, and couples could spend time together.
If you went to Club Med as a couple, somehow your nights were more erotic than at home. The whole Club Med atmosphere was much more erotic. I don't mean that everyone was into swinging, let's not get carried away, but the atmosphere was built on the idea of romance.
Within the club, women discovered a unique space in which they were free, and they were encouraged to take control.
I was lucky to join the club in '68, the year of women's liberation. Before that, would a woman have stood up at a dance or anywhere else to ask, "Will you dance with me?" People would have thought, "Who is this young woman? What on earth is she doing? She must be a floozy." But at the club, after women's liberation, young women would come and ask us to dance.
Les jeunes filles venaient nous inviter à danser.
Tous ceux qui sont en train de danser actuellement, vous allez aller chercher une personne sur les gradins.
At Club Med, women experienced a sort of freedom that they didn't necessarily have in reality in terms of sexuality, the right to choose, the right to live the way they wanted, the right to a different sort of life. So Club Med was a sort of testing ground for them to try out life as liberated women, if you will.
From 1965 onwards in France, women could work without their husband's permission. In 1967, the revolutionary contraceptive pill was made available. And from May 1968, women even stopped wearing bras. This new feeling of freedom and the resulting evolution in morals encouraged Gilbert Trigano to innovate even further. In a frenzy of development, Club Méditerranée crossed the Iron Curtain and opened clubs in the Soviet Union, Romania and Bulgaria. Having moved east, it then went west to Guadeloupe and Martinique. In 1969, a fourth paid week's holiday was introduced in France and mass tourism began. With 45 resorts spread over 4 continents, the club was ready to welcome its guests.
At the beginning of the 1970s, Gilbert wanted to accelerate the club's development, and he assimilated the club's biggest competitor, Club Européen de Tourisme, which meant the club's capacity increased by 50% during the summer of 1970. It suddenly started making serious profits.
The club was opening up to 3 resorts a year and was experiencing its golden age, with 250,000 GMs in 1970. It was France's #1 holiday club. One reason for its success was the way it welcomed its guests. Club Méditerranée was a state of mind. A state of mind embodied by a group of partygoers who would become legendary. The famous GOs. Cheerful, charismatic, sporty, mischievous, and recruited based on some pretty unusual criteria.
We recruited people who had an originality about them, people who were friendly, who always smiled.
If you liked people, it was easy. You were communicating with people, and you also tried to adhere to the club's philosophy, which was about liking people and making them laugh. You did everything you could to make it the time of their lives. It was in your DNA.
It has to be said, all the men and women were good-looking.
GOs only ever wore pareos. We didn't wear GO tags like they do nowadays. We were recognizable because we were muscly, tanned, had long hair, and big smiles at all times. Yes, I'll say it. At the time, we were pretty mouth-watering.
These unique characters were also multi-talented. They'd be in charge of an infinite number of sporting activities, whilst constantly having to keep the GMs amused, often by organizing some totally bizarre games. GOs quickly learnt to be at ease on stage. Every night they put on a show, sang, danced, and acted a clown. They needed to be capable of anything, and it was hard work.
I'd get to the restaurant at 6:30 in the morning. I did magic tricks because that's what I loved and it would wake people up in a friendly way. And at the absolute earliest, I'd get to bed at midnight or 1 a.m. every single day. I didn't take any time off. I did the whole season.
There were roughly 100 GOs to every 1,000 GMs in a resort.
People often thought we were slave drivers because people worked 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. The idea of time off was totally unheard of.
Guests would go wild for the GOs, and Gilbert Trégano wanted to make the most of that. He put huge emphasis on creating some demanding shows worthy of the best cabarets. Club Med was a unique testing ground for budding artists. It's where Nicolas Canteloup, one of France's most recognized impressionists, who was a horse riding monitor at the time, cut his teeth as an impressionist in 1986. One night, he performed a sketch to celebrate the marriage of two of his GO colleagues.
The first time was, well, it was a little big-headed. I suggested to the resort director that I do a sketch with a few impressions.
And he said, "Could you please listen to this? I've written a text for Christophe and Isabelle's wedding tomorrow."
And they said, "Go for it." So all day I was there thinking, why did I tell the resort director I'd do this?
Isabelle, qui est parmi nous, avec Christophe, son compagne. Alors Christophe, parlez-nous de votre rencontre amoureuse avec Isabelle.
When I see the video now, I see they indulge me because it's the beginning of a career, so it's full of mistakes and errors. Now that I have more experience, I look at it and I think, it wasn't very good, but it doesn't matter. It was the beginning and I was a fan of Impressionists. I did impressions of Impressionists to begin with.
Mais j'aimerais en savoir plus sur votre carrière cinématographique, Christophe, puisque je crois que vous tournez le film Coco le concasseur de cacao.
And his show brought the house down. He was so happy on stage, and his talent was so obvious. And I said when presenting him, remember his name, Nicolas Canteloup. This guy will go far.
Thanks to Club Méditerranée, Nicolas Canteloup took advantage of a unique opportunity, even though he was just starting out.
I had a costume designer, I had a set designer, a real 20-meter wide stage, 1,000 people. That was crazy luxury, especially for someone who was totally unknown.
Just like Nicolas Canteloup, others started their careers here as GOs. Cadmerade, Anna Romanoff, Patrick Burel, Luc Besson. The club discovered an incredible number of artists. Then, a group of iconoclastic actors decided to attack the club's image at the risk of making the holiday giant tumble into obscurity. Sea, sex and fun. In 1978, French fried vacation, Les Bronzés, hit cinema screens. Jean-Claude Duss, Popé, Gigi, Bernard, Nathalie and Christiane became part of French history thanks to their cringe-worthy comedy.
C'est-à-dire que mon mari et moi, on était assez réticents vis-à-vis du club, enfin le côté groupe, tout ça. Et puis, de très bons amis à nous, ils sont allés, on s'en venus emballer, alors on s'est dit pourquoi pas.
The rebellious nature of French troupe Le Splendide and director Patrice Lecomte made over 2 million people laugh out loud.
C'est une satire de la vie dans les clubs de vacances, de la vie en commun.
On dit que le club c'est la mort du couple, alors comme je suis célibataire.
It was a very low-budget film, really. It took 6 weeks to film. We found an old Club Med to film in the resort of Aswinde. We lived on set, so it was a really small production, which is totally normal with unknown actors. We didn't know anything about cinema, and all of a sudden, our film was attracting these huge numbers from its first day.
Jean-Claude, c'est plus gradé?
Tu fais gaffe au coup de flottant quand même.
The film was inspired by Club Méditerranée, a universe the members of Le Splendide knew well, having done shows there.
Of course, a lot of it's made up. The dialogue, certain situations which actually didn't take place, but it's full of observations.
The schoolboy humor may have won over a huge number of people, but certain depictions of unbridled sexuality had tongues wagging.
Tu vois, ça casse un peu le personnage.
Eh ben, t'inquiète pas, ma chérie, ça casse pas ce qu'il y a dedans.
Our rivals all shouted, Did you see? We told you it was a brothel and a place of debauchery. You mustn't go there.
The Splendid team spent time at Club Med and created a caricature that was so close to reality that it put the company in danger. Because people who were familiar with Club Med knew that it was close to reality, and those who weren't thought, well, if that's what it's all about, I'm not going.
It was panic stations at Club Méditerranée. Gilbert Trigano did not see the funny side. At HQ, a powerless CEO feared French fried vacation would ruin his company's prospects.
Tout d'abord, quand je l'ai vu, j'étais en pétard. Parce qu'il faut une certaine dose d'humour pour accepter la satire. Probablement, ce n'est pas ma qualité dominante. Puis avec le temps, ce film me fait rigoler parce qu'il a reconnu un fait de société pour le club.
People watch it over and over. It's a cult film. If they're watching it over and over, it's because they like the characters. If you like someone, you want to be with them. You like to be part of their group.
Lots of people came to the club because they'd seen the film.
Gilbert Trigano eventually rediscovered his sense of humor once he realized that reservations for the club hadn't decreased. French fried vacation was the end of a period of transgressions.
Je vais vous présenter l'équipe Géo, la merveilleuse équipe Géo de Malaisie 1980. Welcome to Malaysia!
The 1980s were all about money, showing off, and globalization. Having sent guests to the four corners of the world, Gilbert Trigano's next objective was to attract guests from all over the globe to his clubs. He opened offices all over the world and named his son club president for North America.
Gilbert's idea was that it was a concept that could work for Americans, Brazilians, Japanese.
The club joined Wall Street and was no longer called Club Méditerranée, but simply Club Med, which was easier to pronounce in any language. To build his new advertising campaign, Gilbert Trigano decided to invest in an advertising giant, Jacques Séguéla. His mission, create a hard-hitting campaign.
Instinctively, I thought about what the club represented. Simple happiness. Creativity is about using the fundamentals. This is the only holiday in which you're guaranteed happiness, and that's where the slogan came from. Happiness if you want it.
Je vous rejoins dans 5.
The ads were directed by Patrice Lecomte, director of French Fried Vacation, and voiced by Thierry Lhermitte. Things had come full circle.
Le bonheur, si je veux.
Et pour la poterie, c'est dès qu'il neige.
At the end of the 1980s, with 100 resorts and 1,200,000 GMs all over the world, the club was at the height of its success.
We were the first, if not the only global brand in the holiday industry. French guests then only made up a third of club members. We were the first non-American operator in America, the first non-Japanese holiday operator in Japan.
Gilbert Trigano didn't know it yet, but the 1990s was the beginning of the end for Club Med. The decade got off to a very bad start. Gérard Blitz, the club's original founder, died on the 3rd of March 1990. 2 years later, a tragedy had a deep and lasting impact on Club Med. On February the 9th, 1992, Gilbert Trigano received a phone call explaining that holidaymakers heading to Senegal's Cap Skirring would never make it to their destination.
Un avion frété par le club Méditerranée s'est écrasé ce matin au Sénégal avec 52 personnes à son bord.
The pilot had mistaken the lights from a hotel for those of the landing strip. The catastrophe led to 30 deaths. Gilbert Trigano was devastated.
The plane bound for Cap Skirring, which crashed, was something Gilbert never got over.
As CEO of Club Med, he was sentenced for involuntary homicide. A year later, he left the company at the age of 74, after 40 years at the club's helm.
Merci Gilbert au niveau de tous les géos du club. Merci Gilbert.
He passed the baton to his son Serge in Agadir in front of over 1,000 GOs.
He was a father figure. Really, he was everybody's father. He gave you the desire to live life to the fullest. He was a real leader.
It's thanks to him I joined the club, that I was head of a resort, that I met my wife, and that today I am happy to talk about Club Méditerranée.
At 47 years old, Serge Trigano became Club Med's new CEO, but the economic context was a tricky one.
Le Club Méditerranée a enregistré cette année la plus forte perte de son histoire, 290 millions de francs. Le Club Med a été victime de la crise économique en Europe, mais aussi des troubles politiques dans plusieurs régions touristiques.
Global conflicts and economic crises in the 1990s had devastated the holiday market. Within this difficult context, Club Med had tough competition from cheap, all-inclusive offers. It was the start of the low-cost revolution, and France wanted in on the good deals. Competition and stock market results had huge impacts on Club Med. Shareholders eventually ousted Serge Trigano. He left the company in 1997 after 4 years at its head. The end of the Trigano era. Gilbert Trigano died at the start of 2001. Club Med itself was still making a loss when a global cataclysm forced its directors to make a radical decision: the 9/11 terror attacks.
The tourist market collapsed. Tourism operators needed to rethink the future of their industry. A luxury market emerged from those who wanted high quality, and a separate low-cost market emerged for those looking for a good deal. Club Med was stuck in the middle of these two markets. It didn't have the best products or the best prices, so there was no place for it. The only solution was to go high-end and sell to fewer people, but offer a superior product at a higher price.
The brand wanted a new image. That meant no more bar beads and comedy sketches in its advertising campaigns. Instead, lounge music, an air of calm and social environments to suit each guest. You're alone in the world in your luxury complex or villa.
Tourist expectations these days are not at all the same as those of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Nowadays, I think there are very few people who'd want to go to a hut resort with communal bathrooms and queue for a shower between 6 and 8 p.m. Society has also evolved.
We used to organize more entertainment and participation at resort events. We still offer it, but we no longer enforce it. That's the difference. The Club Med spirit still exists. The entertainment is still there. It's on offer, but it's up to our guests to decide if they'd like to join in or not.
Owned by a big private company since 2015, Club Med now has 65 resorts around the world.
The club's rebirth was also the rebirth of its clientele, because, as you know, Club Med is now mainly developing in Asia for a population which is very new to the idea of holidays, especially the Chinese population. And so what seemed modern to us in the 1970s and 80s is brand new to them.
Asians, Russians, Brazilians, and Americans, today more than 70% of the club's holidaymakers are not French. Thanks to its international clientele, Club Med has enjoyed renewed profits. Today, the multinational company focuses mainly on mountain holidays.
Club Med opens one resort a year. Over the years, they've established Alpe d'Huez, Les Arcs Panorama, and Samoins. And in more recent years, they opened La Rosière.
Our new strategy is summer mountain tourism. There were lots of mountain resorts that were open in the winter, but not in the summer season. And for the last few years, we've been developing the idea of summer vacations in the mountains. And we can see that it's totally in keeping with what's happening elsewhere, and with this new movement towards mountain activities and this very sporty, healthy way of life.
But when the coronavirus pandemic hit the tourism industry, the world stopped. how did the company deal with such an unprecedented crisis? In these videos filmed by holidaymakers, people are still dancing around the poolside. The security of an all-inclusive package and Club Med's solid reputation seem to reassure GMs.
This health crisis has reset the rules. It made operators realize in tourism you have to keep your options open. It's important not to neglect your national clients. Club Med would be very happy to fill its French resorts with French guests, its Italian resorts with Italian guests. The company will adapt, and the next 70 years will show us that the company will continue to evolve. Guests' needs will evolve, and it will continue to preserve the French desire for holiday freedom.
Club Med has always known how best to capture the spirit of the era. But in such unusual conditions, will it still be capable of inventing the holidays of the future?